Henry Anderson left $12,000 spread across the dresser in his bedroom. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't carelessness. It was a deliberate test. A cold, calculated trap designed for anyone who ever worked in his mansion. For 15 years, not a single person had passed. Secretaries, gardeners, cooks, housekeepers, sooner or later, the money always vanished. But that day, when Janet Santos, the new cleaning staff, stepped into the bedroom in her simple uniform and worn-out sneakers, thinking she was alone, she did something so unexpected, so astonishing, that Henry, hiding just out of sight, started questioning everything he thought he knew about people. What began as a trap would turn into one of the most touching stories you'll hear today. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Before we dive in, please hit like and subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from: New York, Jamaica, South Africa, Canada? We'd love to know. Henry Anderson is 38 years old. A sharp, disciplined, extremely wealthy real estate tycoon. But beneath the success is a man who's lost all trust in people. It began with his ex-wife, Linda, who left him for someone richer, walking away without a glance back. That betrayal hardened something inside Henry. A cold, unshakable wall formed in his chest, and it never left. So he started testing everyone. Every new employee in his house faced the same challenge: a large pile of cash left out in plain sight, on a table, countertop, or bedroom dresser, while Henry hid and watched. Secretaries took it. The gardener took it. 3 different cooks. Every single housekeeper. Some grabbed it immediately, others waited a day or two. But inevitably, it all disappeared. And with each loss, Henry's belief solidified: everyone has a price. No one is truly honest. It's only a matter of time. Today, it's Janet's turn. Henry picks up his phone and calls. "Miss Santos, this is Henry Anderson. You can start today." A brief pause. "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir. What's the address?" "Elmswood Drive 14. 1 hour." He hangs up, heads upstairs, and retrieves a thick envelope from his dresser drawer. $12,000, neatly counted, now scattered casually across the top of the dresser, some hundreds here, some 50s there, a big stack in the middle, careless, inviting, impossible to miss. He steps back, then moves behind the bedroom door, into the narrow shadow where he cannot be seen. He waits. 45 minutes later, the doorbell rings. Janet Santos, 33, stands at the front door. Her uniform is simple, clean but faded. Her sneakers worn so thin she'd stuffed cardboard in the left one to cover a hole. Yet her posture is straight, her chin up, her bag of cleaning supplies resting on one shoulder. Calm, ready. Henry opens the door. "Miss Santos, I'm Henry Anderson. Please come in." "Good morning, sir." She steps inside, moving quietly, not with greed, not with envy, but with careful attention, observing the home before touching anything. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, the curved staircase, everything expensive, everything perfect. Henry gives a quick tour: kitchen, living room, hallway, bathrooms. His tone flat, professional. "General cleaning, 3 times a week. You'll start upstairs. My bedroom needs special attention." Janet nods, observing each room closely. "Understood, sir. I'll take care of everything." She pauses, then quietly adds, "You have a beautiful home." Henry says nothing, simply leading her toward the stairs. Moments later, he returns behind the bedroom door. He hears her downstairs, bags set down, bottles clinking, sneakers squeaking. Then her slow, steady footsteps on the stairs. Arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the dresser with the scattered bills. $12,000. "Let's see, Miss Santos." Her footsteps reach the top, move along the hallway, pause at the bedroom door. 2, maybe 3 seconds. The door swings open. Janet enters. Sunlight fills the large room. King-sized bed, Dark covers, heavy wood furniture, everything neat, everything quiet. She sets her bag down, reaches for her cleaning cloth, and straightens, ready to work. Then she sees the money. She freezes. The cloth hangs loosely. Her eyes slowly scan the scattered bills, hundreds, fifties, the big stack in the center. For a moment, she doesn't breathe. Henry holds his breath too, leaning forward, tense. Here it comes, he thinks, the moment before everyone gives in. Janet's hand tightens on the cloth. She stares at the money, motionless, not moving closer. Her lips twitch as if counting without thinking. Henry knows this pause, he's seen it before. He waits. Janet steps forward, once. Henry's jaw tightens. Twice. Then a cleaning bottle slips from under her arm, clattering loudly. She flinches, bends to pick it up, stands again, pressing it firmly under her arm. She looks at the dresser. And then she does something Henry has never seen. She carefully places the cleaning cloth over her shoulder, sets the bottle down beside her, and starts organizing the money, not hiding it, not pocketing it, but straightening it, separating hundreds from fifties, smoothing edges, building neat stacks in the center. Her movements are gentle, precise, respectful. Henry drops his arms. Mouth slightly open. Once done, Janet pulls a notepad and pen from her uniform pocket. She writes, tears out the page, folds it neatly, and lays it on the money, pressing it flat. She steps back, glances at the dresser like someone admiring a finished task, and whispers softly, barely audible. "Thank you, Lord, for an honest job." Then she picks up her cleaning bottle, unfolds her cloth, and begins working. Dusting, wiping, sweeping, moving furniture carefully. Never once touching or glancing at the money. Henry doesn't move. Not while she finishes, not while she straightens pillows, not as she exits the room. He watches the dresser, the neat stacks, the note. Finally, he steps forward, lifts the note gently, unsure if he wants to read it. In careful, clean handwriting, it reads, $12,000 found on the bedroom dresser. All bills accounted for and organized. Janet Santos. Henry read the note once, then read it again. Slowly, he set it back down on top of the cash. For a long moment, he just stood there. The bedroom was quiet. Outside, the city moved as it always did, cars, voices, the distant hum of everyday life. But inside this room, inside Henry Anderson's chest, something was shifting that he couldn't put a name to. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. Janet had been at the house less than 2 hours, and she was still cleaning. He could hear her down the hall, moving steadily, methodically, with the same calm, unhurried care. Henry stepped to the bedroom doorway and looked out. She was in the guest bathroom across the hall, scrubbing the sink with her back to him. She hummed softly, a quiet tune he didn't recognize, a private melody someone hums when they think no one is listening. He watched her for a few moments, then turned and went downstairs. At the kitchen table, the long glass one where he usually ate alone, he rested his hands flat on the surface, staring at them. Hands that had built everything from nothing. Hands that counted money like others counted breaths. Hands that hadn't fully trusted another person in 15 years. He thought about the note, all bills accounted for. She hadn't just ignored the cash. She had counted it, organized it, documented it with her full name as if she were filing a report. She wanted a record, proof that not a single dollar could ever be questioned on her watch. That wasn't the act of someone resisting temptation. That was someone who had quietly decided long ago how she would behave. Henry stayed at the table a long while. When Janet came downstairs an hour later, bag over her shoulder and her work complete, she found him still sitting there. He looked up. She gave a small professional nod. "All finished, sir. East wing, upper floor. I left a note in the bedroom about the cash I found, just to document it." "I saw it," Henry said. "Good," she replied, adjusting her bag. "Same days next week?" "Yes," Henry said, studying her for a moment, worn sneakers, cardboard insole, small, precise handwriting. She had just spent time alone in a room with $12,000 and walked out without a single bill. She nodded and left. Henry listened as the front door closed softly behind her. He pulled the folded note from his jacket pocket and smoothed it flat on the glass table. $12,000 found on the bedroom dresser. All bills accounted for and organized. Janet Santos. He had run this test for 15 years. For the first time, he didn't know what to do with the result. 3 weeks later, the second test. $8,000 in the kitchen, neatly tucked into an open envelope on the counter by the dish soap and sponge, the perfect spot someone cleaning would naturally reach. Henry watched from the hallway through a gap in the door. Janet set her bag down and started cleaning left to right, wiping counters in long, even strokes, moving objects carefully, cleaning beneath them, placing everything back exactly where it had been. When she reached the envelope, she paused, lifted it slightly with 2 fingers, looked inside, then set it back down. She finished wiping the counter, adjusted the envelope to clean beneath it, and returned it to its spot. Before leaving, she pulled out her notepad and wrote a note. When Henry checked afterward, $8,000 in white envelope found on kitchen counter. Moved briefly to clean surface beneath. Returned to original position. Janet Santos. That same quiet, unsettling feeling returned. He tucked the note into his jacket pocket. He didn't discard it. The third test, $5,000 in the laundry room, behind a bottle of fabric softener. The fourth, $15,000 on the bathroom counter in a clear plastic bag. The fifth, scattered bills on the study floor, as if they had fallen, the door wide open. Each time, Janet found the money. Each time, she left it untouched, or better, organized it neatly and wrote a note with her full name. Henry kept every one. He told himself it was evidence, documentation of an experiment. But the pile in his desk drawer grew. Often, late at night, he would open it, study the notes, unsure why he needed to. $15,000 in plastic bag bathroom counter untouched. Janet Santos. $5,000 found scattered on study floor, gathered and placed on desk. Janet Santos. The handwriting was always the same, calm, precise, unhurried, like Janet herself. By the end of the first year, he had tested her 11 times. She passed every single time. By the second year, he stopped counting. He still left money occasionally, old habit, old instinct, but he no longer expected a different outcome. What he found himself doing instead was watching her work, not to catch her, just observing how she handled fragile things, the cracked ceramic lamp upstairs, the framed photos in the study. She lifted, cleaned, and replaced everything with careful, quiet respect. She never rushed. She never took shortcuts, whether Henry was home or not. Camera footage confirmed it. Janet was the same diligent, steady person, seen in real life or on screen. It unsettled him. He believed people only behaved when observed, that morality was mostly performance. Janet acted as if she were accountable to something no camera could record. And it made him feel something he wouldn't admit, not yet, maybe never, a quiet, creeping sense of humility, like noticing flowers in a garden you've walked past for years. In her third year, he noticed a pattern, Tuesdays and Thursdays. He had been working from home those days, and he saw her leave an hour early, quietly, without announcement. Over weeks, the same, every Tuesday, every Thursday. At first, he wondered if she was hiding something. 15 years of experience told him he'd recognize a secret. And yet, Janet Santos, so steady, so honest, began to cast shadows of doubt in his mind. The next Tuesday, he heard her steps heading toward the door early. Already, he was up, keys in hand, telling himself he was just being thorough. He followed her. The city thrummed with late afternoon traffic, people moving fast, faces downcast. Henry trailed 2 cars behind the bus she boarded, feeling slightly ridiculous in his dark sedan and tailored jacket. But he didn't look back. The bus wound through neighborhoods he rarely visited, smaller streets, older buildings, quiet, hard-working areas. Janet sat by the window, her profile visible as traffic slowed. She wasn't lost in thought, exactly, just resting, conserving her energy, moving deliberately. 20 minutes later, she got off. Henry parked clumsily, one wheel on the curb, and followed on foot. She walked quickly now, faster than she did in the house, with purpose and direction, like a woman who knew exactly where she needed to be and couldn't get there fast enough. She rounded a corner. Henry followed, but then stopped. In front of him, taking up most of the block with its wide glass doors and simple brown sign above the entrance, was a building he immediately recognized, City General Hospital. He watched Janet push through the sliding doors and disappear inside. Henry stayed on the sidewalk, unmoving for a moment. People brushed past, a taxi honked, the city continued its indifferent, loud rhythm. Slowly, he stepped through the doors after her. The hospital smelled the way all hospitals do, sharp, clean, and faintly sad. The lobby was crowded, people moving in every direction. Henry scanned the space, catching sight of Janet's faded uniform as she disappeared down a hallway to the left. He followed at a distance. She moved like someone who knew the building, every turn, every corner. Past the pharmacy, past the nurse's station, through double doors into a longer corridor painted pale yellow, quieter now, hushed. Henry stopped outside the doors. A small sign read, Pediatric Oncology Ward. Janet was already halfway down the hall. She paused outside room 14, doing something Henry had never seen. One hand on the door handle, her head bowed slightly, eyes closed, as if she was preparing herself, softening her expression, steadying her presence, readying to meet the child on the other side. Then she opened the door and went in. Henry moved slowly down the corridor and stopped outside the room. The door wasn't fully closed. Through the gap, he saw a slice of the space, a window with thin curtains letting in pale afternoon light, the edge of a hospital bed, medical equipment quietly blinking, and a small boy, about 7 years old. His head was bald, his face thin in a way that took your breath. It wasn't from hunger, this was something deeper, something internal. Janet was already beside him. She pulled a chair close and sat, leaning forward to hold both of his small hands in hers. She spoke softly, warmly, in a voice different from the professional quiet she used in Henry's house, tired, older, full of something he couldn't name. The boy turned his head slightly and said something, and she laughed, a real laugh, brief but full, costing her something. She reached up and touched his cheek gently, then spoke loud enough for Henry to hear. "Mama's here, baby. Mama's here." Henry stepped back from the door, hand finding the wall. A nurse appeared, brushing past him with a polite, distracted smile, knocking twice on the door before stepping inside. He stayed pressed to the wall. Through the gap, he heard. "Mrs. Santos, I'm sorry, but we still need to finalize payment for Gabriel's next chemo cycle. The billing office has been trying to reach you." Janet's voice, steady and quiet, "I know. I'll speak to them before I leave." The nurse returned to the corridor, moving on. Henry did not move. He leaned against the wall, hand pressed to the plaster, looking at the ceiling. Something inside him cracked open, a part he'd sealed long ago and convinced himself was better left closed. Gabriel. Her son. He was sick. He didn't know how long he stood there, long enough for the afternoon light to shift toward evening, for nurses to pass with polite smiles, for the sounds of the ward to settle into a soft rhythm, quiet footsteps, hushed voices, machines beeping behind closed doors. Henry, a man who decided quickly in boardrooms and negotiations, who rarely hesitated, could not move. He stayed outside room 14 until Janet stepped out. She saw him immediately. The look on her face was not guilt, not fear of being caught. It was something quieter, more painful, the fear of keeping a fragile balance that could break at any moment. "Mr. Anderson," she said, voice steady but barely above a whisper. Henry opened his mouth, then closed it. Words felt wrong here, shapeless. "I was in the neighborhood," he finally said. Obvious and untrue. A flicker of almost smile crossed her face, then it vanished. "I see," she said. They looked at each other, millionaire in tailored jacket, cleaning woman in faded uniform, each unsure what came next. "Can we talk?" Henry asked. There was a small cafe 2 blocks away, with plastic chairs, laminated menus, and a woman behind the counter calling everyone sweetheart without looking up. Henry felt out of place. Across the small table, he folded his hands. Janet wrapped hers around an untouched cup of tea. Outside, the city shifted from day to night, streetlights flickering, traffic thinning, sky deepening to the blue before dark. "How long?" he asked. Janet looked at her tea. "Gabriel was diagnosed 8 months ago. Leukemia." She said it flatly, as though the word had lost all shock through repetition. "He's 7. He turned 7 in February. He fainted mid-birthday song." Henry said nothing. "My husband, Robert, died 3 years ago. Construction accident, scaffold gave way on the 14th floor. There were 2 others. They all," she paused, lifted the tea, held it, then set it down. "Gabriel is all I have." "The treatment?" Henry asked carefully. "Chemotherapy, insurance covers some, but not all." "How much is the gap?" She named a number. Henry's face remained neutral. Not impossible for him, but for her, it wasn't a number, it was a wall. A wall she had been pushing against every day for 8 months, alone. "I've been taking extra shifts through the agency, evenings and weekends. I sold my husband's watch, his tools, in February. Gabriel hasn't mentioned it." Henry looked at his hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" She met his gaze, firm, dignified, tired. "Tell you what, Mr. Anderson? That my son is sick? That I need help? I come to your house to clean. That's what you pay me for. My life is not part of the arrangement. I don't ask for mercy, not from employers, not from anyone." She looked back at the tea. "My mother raised me to stand on my own. I know how I appear to people. When they know, they pity you. And pity is heavy. If I start asking for mercy, I may forget how to stand." The cafe around them was warm and gently noisy. Cups clinked together, a quiet television hummed in the corner, and the woman behind the counter casually called people sweetheart as she worked. Right in the middle of it all, Henry sat perfectly still. For 15 years, he had slowly built a belief shaped by disappointment. Every stolen dollar, every broken promise, every person who had stared him straight in the eyes and lied, he had kept those memories the way other men kept trophies. He stacked them together, piece by piece, until he convinced himself that what he had built was wisdom. But now, sitting across from Janet Santos in a plastic chair inside a small cafe near City General Hospital, he could feel that entire structure beginning to shake. Because the woman sitting in front of him had once been alone in a room with $12,000, then $8,000, then 15 again. Over and over. For 3 years. And during those years she had been living through a crisis that would have made most people feel completely justified taking whatever money they could get their hands on. But she hadn't taken a single cent. Not once. Instead, she left notes. Carefully written notes. Signed notes. As if honesty wasn't something she forced herself to choose under pressure, but simply the way she was made. Henry thought about the notes sitting in the drawer of his desk. He had never thrown even one of them away. He thought about Gabriel, 7 years old, with no hair, holding his mother's hands in the pale light of room 14. He remembered Janet's face in the hospital hallway. That specific kind of fear, not fear of being caught doing something wrong. Fear of losing the one thing that kept her standing. He also remembered something she had said earlier. "I may forget how to stand." Henry cleared his throat. "I'd like to help with Gabriel's treatment," he said. "The full cost. Whatever the insurance doesn't cover." Janet's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. "Mr. Anderson. I'm not asking permission," he said. Then he heard how firm that sounded and softened his tone, something that never came easily to him. "I mean, I'm not offering because I feel sorry for you. I want to be clear about that. I'm not sitting here out of pity. She studied him carefully. Then why? She asked. Henry stayed quiet for a moment. Because I can, he said finally. And because. He stopped speaking and looked down at the table. Because it's the right thing to do. He hadn't said those words in a very long time. They felt strange leaving his mouth, a little stiff, like a joint that hadn't moved in years. But they were true. And somewhere inside him, he still recognized the feeling of something honest. Janet watched him for a long moment. Her expression was difficult to read. There was the quiet dignity she always carried with her, the kind that didn't bend easily. There was the exhaustion she tried to hide, though it always lingered behind her eyes if someone looked closely enough. And now there was something else. Careful uncertainty. The look of someone standing at a door and wondering if it was safe to walk through. I would pay you back, she said quietly. Every dollar. That's not necessary, Henry replied. It is to me. The way she said it made it clear that arguing would lead nowhere. Henry nodded. All right. They sat there another minute in silence. Outside, a bus rolled past, its headlights briefly sliding across the cafe window. Janet lifted her tea and finally took a sip. She held the cup with both hands while looking out at the dark street. Henry watched her profile, tired but steady, somehow still strong, like something that had survived every storm thrown at it. He likes dinosaurs, she said suddenly. Henry blinked. Sorry? Gabriel, she said softly. A short pause. He likes dinosaurs. He had a picture book. She hesitated. Well, he had one. I had to sell most of his books. She stopped for a moment and pressed her lips together. But he still talks about dinosaurs, she said quietly. Henry didn't say anything. But something in his chest shifted. Henry never attached his name to the payment. That same evening he called his financial advisor from his car while the city lights slid past the windows. He arranged a donation to City General Hospital, specifically marked for Gabriel Santos in pediatric oncology. The money covered the entire remaining cost of treatment. Not the standard option. The best one the hospital offered. The one with stronger medication, specialist consultations, and extra support hours. The one the billing office had mentioned before, but Janet couldn't afford. His advisor asked, "Do you want a receipt for tax purposes?" "No," Henry said. "Should I include a note or your name?" "No," he answered again. "Make it anonymous." He ended the call. For a moment he sat in the car outside his mansion. Through the gate he could see the lights shining inside the house. All those rooms. All that marble. All that expensive silence. A monument to everything he had built. And no one there to share it with. For years he had told himself he preferred it that way. But now, sitting there in the quiet, he began to wonder if that was actually true. Or if it was simply something he had repeated to himself so many times that it started to feel like fact. He started wondering whether that was actually true, or if it was simply something he had repeated to himself so many times that it began to feel real. Henry stepped out of the car and walked inside. That night, sleep didn't come easily. 3 days passed. Then 4. Henry moved through his work the same way he always had. Meetings. Phone calls. Property visits. Contracts. He sat at the head of long conference tables making decisions worth millions of dollars. No one looking at him would guess that part of his mind was somewhere else entirely. But it was. On Tuesday afternoons he caught himself checking the clock. He kept thinking about a 7-year-old boy whose dinosaur book had been sold to help pay medical bills. Late at night he found himself opening the drawer in his desk and staring at the stack of notes, even though he wasn't sure what he expected to find there. $8,000 in white envelope found on kitchen counter. Janet Santos. $15,000 in plastic bag bathroom counter untouched. Janet Santos. He closed the drawer. He told himself the donation had been the right thing to do. The situation was resolved. That was the end of it. But it wasn't. On the sixth day, his phone rang. It was Janet. She had never called him before. In 3 years, nearly every interaction between them had gone one direction. Mr. Cole would pass along schedules. Janet would leave written notes. Henry would watch everything from a careful distance. Their relationship had never included phone calls. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Santos." "Mr. Anderson." Her voice sounded different from the one she used in his house. It was still steady, but something underneath that calm tone was clearly working hard to stay controlled. "Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry for calling you directly," she said. "I got your number from the agency." A short pause followed. "The hospital called me this morning." Henry didn't respond. "They told me Gabriel's entire treatment has been paid for by an anonymous donor." She stopped speaking. Through the phone he could hear her breathing, slow, careful breaths. The kind of breathing someone learns when they've spent a long time holding themselves together during difficult moments. "Mr. Anderson, was it you?" Henry looked at the wall across his office. "Why would you think it was me?" he asked. "Because," she said quietly, "you're the only person in my life who could." The office felt very still. Outside the window 30 floors below, the city moved constantly, cars, lights, people, busy and indifferent to everything happening above. "Yes," Henry said finally. "It was me." The silence that followed was different from his own. His silence was controlled. Hers felt full, like a room filled with something too large to talk around right away. When she finally spoke again, her voice wasn't what he expected. There were no tears. No shaky words. She sounded like herself. Just quieter. As if something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders. "I would like to come speak with you in person," she said. "If that's all right." "That isn't necessary," Henry replied. "It is to me," she said. He recognized those words immediately. She had said the same thing 3 days earlier in the small cafe near the hospital. Henry paused. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow after your shift." The next day she came to see him in his study. Henry was seated behind his desk when she knocked. Just 2 quiet taps of her knuckles against the open door. She was still wearing her work uniform. She had clearly come straight from cleaning. "Come in," he said. Janet stepped inside and stopped in front of the desk. She didn't sit down. Her hands rested loosely at her sides as she looked at him with an expression that was surprisingly difficult to face. It wasn't simple gratitude. Though gratitude was part of it. There was something deeper in her expression. Something heavier. "I've been thinking about what to say to you since yesterday morning," she said. "Since the hospital called." Henry leaned back slightly in his chair and waited. "At first," she said slowly, "I was angry." Henry raised an eyebrow. That wasn't what he expected. "Angry," she said again, simply, without apology. "Yes. Because I hadn't asked for it. Because you acted without telling me." She paused, choosing her words as carefully as she arranged furniture, making sure every piece landed exactly where she intended. "Because I've been struggling to handle this on my own. And for a moment, when I heard, I felt like that fight had been taken from me." Henry didn't answer. He just sat with it. Then she continued, and slowly, he understood. She met his eyes directly. "You didn't do it to take anything from me. You did it because you saw my son and knew you could help, and you chose to act. That's different." "Yes," Henry said quietly. "That's exactly what I intended." She stayed silent for a moment. "Mr. Anderson, I've worked in a lot of houses. For a lot of people. Some were kind, some were not. But most," she hesitated, "most never truly saw me. I was just the person who cleaned, the uniform, the worn-out shoes." She glanced at his desk and back up at him. "But you watched me for 3 years. I knew I wasn't invisible to you." Henry felt something shift in his chest. "I never tried to hide it," he admitted. But even as he said it, he he realized it wasn't entirely true. "I know what you were doing," she said. Henry went still. "The money," she said, listing it quietly, steadily. "On the dresser, the kitchen counter, the bathroom, the study floor." "It wasn't carelessness, Mr. Anderson." "You're not careless." The study was quiet. Henry had waited for this, without realizing it, the moment when what he'd been doing in secret would finally be named. Now that it had arrived, he couldn't rely on rehearsed reactions. No cold logic, no dismissiveness. He just sat and let the truth hang in the room. "No," he said, finally. "It wasn't carelessness." "You were testing me," she said. Not as blame, but like pointing out a location on a map. "This is where we are." "Yes," he replied. "And everyone before me, they failed." "Yes." She nodded slowly, calm, not hurt. She looked at him the way someone studies something they've already understood but wanted confirmed. "How much did you leave?" Henry considered it. "Over 3 years? Just over $90,000. Spread across the different tests." Something passed over her face, not shock, but the fatigue of someone who realized how close they'd stood to an unseen edge. $90,000, she murmured. "Yes," he confirmed. She glanced at the window, the city sparkling behind the glass, vast and oblivious to the small, intense conversation. Then she looked back. "Mr. Anderson, I would never have taken from you, not even to save my son." She said it plainly, like the facts of her name or age, fixed and true, needing no argument. Henry looked at her, and something shifted inside him, a quiet, seismic change in the foundation of a belief he had spent 15 years building. Not a crash, no dramatic collapse. More like a single stone removed from a wall. One stone, but a load-bearing one. Everyone has a price, he had told himself over and over. But sitting here, looking at this woman, who had sorted his money, written notes, carried her son through chemotherapy alone, he realized he had been wrong. Not about everyone. About her. And if he was wrong about her, then the wall had a crack. He didn't finish the thought. "I know," he said instead. Just 2 words, simple, without strategy, without calculation. Just him speaking truth. Janet looked at him a moment longer, then reached into the front pocket of her uniform, the pocket where her notepad always lived, and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. She leaned forward and placed it on his desk. "I wanted to give you this in person," she said. Henry picked it up and unfolded it. It was a receipt from City General Hospital showing Gabriel's full treatment cost, and at the bottom, in the donor space, anonymous. Below that, in her handwriting, asterisk, "I will pay back every dollar. It may take time, but I am keeping count. Janet Santos." Asterisk. Henry stared. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said, steady. "But I need to. Do you understand the difference?" He looked up and understood completely. He had spent his life doing things he didn't have to but felt compelled to do. He recognized that same stubbornness in her. "Yes," he said. "I understand." She gave a small nod. "I'll see you Thursday," she said. She picked up her bag, swung it over her shoulder, and left the study. Henry remained at his desk long after her footsteps faded. He still held the receipt. Gabriel responded to the new treatment almost immediately. The specialist, Dr. Reeves, a calm, confident woman who delivered both good and bad news with the same measured tone, told Janet at the end of the 3rd week that Gabriel's numbers were improving. She spoke in terms Henry would not understand fully for another month, but it was clear, the boy was fighting, the medicine was working, and there was real reason to hope. Henry heard this news secondhand. It was Thursday afternoon, and Janet had stopped in the kitchen doorway after finishing the East Wing. He was holding a coffee he had forgotten to drink. "I heard from Dr. Reeves this week," she said quietly. "Gabriel's numbers are improving." "That's good news," Henry replied. "Yes, boss." "Very good news," she said, holding her hands lightly on the counter, her tone careful, like she was handling something fragile she didn't want to break by believing too hard. Henry looked away briefly, unsure where to put his attention. "I'm glad," he said finally, and realized he truly was. Not the polite gladness for a stranger, but the deep, personal gladness that comes from caring about something that matters. He picked up his coffee and looked out the window. Does he still like dinosaurs? A pause. When he looked back, Janet's expression was different, gentle, almost softened. "Yes," she said. "Good," he said, without explaining why. That evening, after Janet left, Henry ordered a large, full-color, hardcover encyclopedia of prehistoric dinosaurs, the kind almost too heavy for a 7-year-old to hold. He didn't overthink it. He just did it. Henry had it sent straight to City General Hospital. "Attention, Gabriel Santos, room 14. He didn't include a note. He closed his laptop and returned to his work, though he sat differently in his chair for the rest of the evening, a little lighter somehow. The book arrived on a Saturday. Henry knew because Janet mentioned it the following Thursday, in a way he would remember for a long time. She came into the kitchen while he was standing at the counter. "Same spot, same forgotten coffee," she said, dropping her cleaning bag by the door. Without any small talk, she added, "Gabriel got a book at the hospital this week. A hardcover dinosaur encyclopedia." No note. Henry looked at his coffee. Did he? He did. He had the nurses read it 3 times in one day. Dr. Reeves says he now knows more about the Cretaceous period than she expected. Henry said nothing, but the corner of his mouth betrayed a subtle reaction, neither a smile nor not a smile. "That was very kind," Janet said simply, "whoever sent it." She picked up her bag and headed upstairs to start her work. Henry stayed by the window, looking out at the perfectly trimmed garden that nobody ever sat in. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something warm he didn't immediately understand. 6 weeks later, Gabriel came home, not to their old house, which had been sold for a smaller apartment closer to the hospital, but home to the new apartment, his room with the narrow bed, second-hand curtains, and the dinosaur encyclopedia on the shelf, too big for it, yet proudly in place. Henry didn't know this directly. He noticed on a Tuesday when Janet stayed at her usual finishing time. He checked the camera feed and saw her downstairs, working through the last rooms of the ground floor with her usual careful attention. "You stayed downstairs. You're still here," he said. "Gabriel came home yesterday," she replied. "I didn't need to leave early." Henry entered the doorway. "How is he?" "Tired," she said, "but home. Dr. Reeves says the next few months will tell us more. He's eating, and this morning he said the Brachiosaurus was unfairly underrated." "The book, probably," Henry said. She glanced at him. "Probably," she agreed, and went back to work. Henry began changing things slowly, the way he always did, one deliberate decision at a time. He started with employment policies. One morning, he called Mr. Cole into his office. "From now on, all household staff at the mansion get full healthcare coverage," he said. "Not the minimal plan from the agency. Dental, vision, mental health, full coverage." "All staff?" Mr. Cole asked, adjusting his glasses. "Past and present," Henry said. Mr. Cole made a note. "Also," Henry added, "review every compensation package. Anyone earning below a living wage gets corrected immediately." "Anything else, sir?" Henry thought a moment. "Stop calling me sir." "Henry?" "Yes." "Henry will do." Mr. Cole looked slightly uncomfortable at the sudden rule change but nodded. Small things, Henry realized, could be the most meaningful. He stopped hiding. Gradually, he stopped positioning himself behind doors, stopped checking cameras for signs of dishonesty, stopped leaving money in plain sight to see what happened. The cameras remained, but for practical reasons, deliveries, gates, not surveillance. One afternoon, he paused in front of the drawer with Janet's notes. He opened it anyway. 3 years of careful handwriting stared back at him. $12,000 on the bedroom dresser, all accounted for. Janet Santos. He held them a moment, then closed the drawer. Not because they were proof anymore, but as a record of the moment things began to shift, the first crack in a wall he had spent 15 years building. Gabriel visited the mansion once. Janet suggested it carefully, hesitantly. "He's been asking about where I work," she said. "I thought, if it's not an inconvenience." Henry said yes before she finished. It surprised them both. Gabriel arrived on a Saturday morning. Janet held his hand at the front door. Gabriel looked up at the grand staircase, the marble floors, the high ceiling. "It looks like a museum," he said seriously. Janet closed her eyes briefly, and Henry laughed, a real laugh, short and genuine, not the polished version he used in meetings. "Are you the man who owns the dinosaur book?" Gabriel asked. Henry glanced at Janet. She looked at the ceiling. "I might be," he said. Gabriel considered this seriously. "The Brachiosaurus section is the best. But the illustrator got the neck angle wrong on page 47. I can show you." Henry looked down at the small, pale boy with oversized eyes and a commanding knowledge of dinosaurs. "I'd like that," he said. For 45 minutes, they sat on the study floor. Gabriel cross-legged with the encyclopedia open, Henry in a nearby armchair, and Janet pretending to read on the sofa but not really looking. Gabriel carefully pointed out every inaccuracy in the Brachiosaurus illustrations, like a young professor, and Henry listened to every word. When they left, Gabriel paused at the front door. "Thank you for the book," he said. "And for my treatment." "You're welcome, Gabriel," Henry replied. Gabriel nodded, satisfied, took his mother's hand, and walked down the driveway. Henry stayed in the doorway, watching them, Janet with her straight back, worn sneakers, and her son's hand in hers, both small against the long driveway, the iron gate, and the wide city beyond. He stood there until they disappeared, and then a little longer.